Good morning, IEEE. I'm Russ Harrison, Director of Government Relations for IEEE-USA in Washington. This is our second CVD training session for our 2022 CVD. And like this session itself, a lot of things are in flux. And so we're going to walk through the messaging for this year's session. We're going to talk about the bills, but as you will see, there's a lot of moving parts still. And so we will get you up to speed as fast as possible. CVD update, just to let you know where we stand, we have 305 total participants. It's actually 304 now because we lost one just a few minutes ago. And, you know, that number is going to move around a little bit. But we have 41 states represented, 171 total unique congressional districts, meaning our total visits right now are going to be 253, or just shy of half of Congress and 82% of the United States Senate, which is pretty darn cool. Total number of meetings secured so far, 126 as of yesterday. It's a little higher now. But you'll notice that's less than half of the total meetings, roughly half of the total meetings have been secured. That is normal. A lot of these meetings will come together in the last week, and that's the best we're going to be able to do, I'm afraid, just because that's how Capitol Hill works. Things get scheduled at the last moment. Total legislative meetings so far are 16. So 16 members of Congress have said they would like to speak with you, which is, again, good. That number is always kind of an approximation because congressional schedules change at the last possible moment. And, you know, some of those meetings will happen, some of them won't. Legislators will stop in on some meetings where we don't expect them. But 16 does indicate a pretty good amount of interest in speaking with you next week. Like I said, we're going to talk today about messaging and messages. What it is, we talked last time about how to run your meeting and how to structure your meeting. Now we're going to talk about what you're actually going to say. And the trick to running a meeting like this, a CVD event like this, from my perspective, is to keep things nice and simple and clean, to make it easy on your advocates so that they can, so that you have a fairly simple message to convey to your legislators. You don't have a lot of time. You're not professionals. And so we try to make it as easy on you as possible. This year, we're going to try something different. We have an opportunity right now, this week and next week, and probably the week after that, to impact what could become the most significant piece of legislation for technologists coming out of Congress in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe arguably longer than that. And so we're going to jump on that opportunity and focus on it. But that does mean that our message and our messaging is going to be a little more complicated than usual, unfortunately. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me as I walk through this. And if you have questions, we can answer them at the end. We have plenty of time to have a dialogue. But this is going to be a little more complicated than your average CVD, and it is so for a reason. Before we get to that, though, I want to remind you that this is not a comprehensive briefing. You are not going to be educating your congressmen or their staffers about legislation. You're not going to be going into all the details and all the ins and outs and details and subclauses in the bill. No. You're making a sales pitch, and a pretty direct one at that. You're going to say, this is what we want you to do. And very briefly, this is why we want you to do it. But the power of your meetings is not going to come from your logic. It's not going to come from your detailed knowledge of the legislation, which you're not going to have because the legislation is super complicated. The power of your meetings comes from you showing up and saying, by showing up, I'm a voter, and this is what we want you to worry about. This is what we want you to focus on. This is what we want you to do. And that's it. So the messaging, while it's going to be a little more complicated than usual, is not going to be as complicated as you might think because you don't have time. You're not a lobbyist. You're a voter, which is better. And we're going to try to boil things down to make it nice and simple for you. Several of you have already noticed this, but you should have received, or should be receiving in the next little bit, an email from Soapbox Consulting. In that email is a link to your personal digital tool that will have all the information you need to conduct your meeting. It doesn't yet have all your meetings in there. Like I said, most of the meetings, about half the meetings haven't been scheduled yet. You will be getting leave behind material and briefing material from IEEE-USA in the next couple days. So by the weekend, it'll all be in there in a nice little package for you to find and to look at. Your links to your meetings when they're scheduled will also be in there. Kevin from Soapbox Consulting will be joining us later in this presentation to kind of talk you through it all. But I wanted you to be aware that that email should be in your inboxes. And if it is, after this session, I need you to open up that tool so that we know you have it. We'll talk a little more about that later. But that's where all the information will be contained for your meetings, the briefing materials, the leave behinds, and all that. So don't worry about finding that information. It'll be in there. It's not all in there now. I'll explain why in a minute, but it will be shortly. So again, our basic message to Congress is actually the same as last year, which is that Congress needs to make strategic investments in technology. Congress has an opportunity to go big in innovation, particularly technological innovation, and we are encouraging them to do so. That's the easy part. Here's the hard part. There are two bills in Congress, USICA, the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, and the Competes Act. They are sort of different bills and sort of not. If you read them, they read much different. The text, the policies, very, very different, with one big exception. But Congress is treating them as if they are the same piece of legislation. They will be combined, and a final version will be produced sometime, probably late this spring or early summer. If the House and Senate can pass that combined bill, it will become law, and it will have a massive impact, positive impact, on how most IEEE members do their job. Let's walk through the two bills. USICA S-1260 is the Senate bill introduced by Senator Schumer and Young. It has passed the U.S. Senate. It has passed with broad bipartisan support in the Senate. It is the preferred option of IEEE-USA in most cases. I'll get to the details in a minute. Competes is a House bill, H.R. 4521. It has passed the House on a mostly partisan vote. There was one Republican that voted for the bill and one Democrat who voted against the bill. But other than that, it was straight party lines. It is a good bill. We are not opposed to Competes. We just think many of the provisions in USICA are better. So here's the current state of play. USICA passed the Senate, Competes passed the House. Because Competes raises a little bit of revenue, technically under the Constitution, it has to start, the final bill had to start in the House. So what the Senate did yesterday was passed Competes, but they didn't really. What they did is they took the House Competes bill, took all of the text out, put all of the USICA text into it, and then passed a bill that was called the Competes. This is entirely irrelevant to your meeting because it's all just internal procedural stuff. The important thing is this. Now that Competes has passed the Senate, even though what passed the Senate has only the loosest connection to what passed the House, that triggers what's called a conference committee, where leaders of the House and leaders of the Senate will now come together to negotiate the final form of the bill, which is what we want. Those conferees might be announced by Friday. They might be announced before your meetings next week, or maybe not. We will keep you up to date on how that goes, just so you know. But here's the important thing for your meetings. Congress is debating these bills right now, today and next week. Every congressional office will have opportunities to weigh in on what pieces they want included in the final bill, what pieces they don't want included in the final bill. You will be meeting with your legislators at precisely the right moment to have the maximum impact on the final draft of this bill, which is very exciting. So again, I know this is going to be a little more complicated than we would ideally want, but we do have this tiny little window to really influence what could be a very, very major piece of legislation. Here's why. Within the USICA competes world, we have a couple asks, actually a series of asks, which I'm going to walk through. The first ask is simply, you guys need to pass this. Like I said, we're not against the competes bill. If the competes bill, as the House passed it, ends up being the final bill, that is a very good bill. So what we want most out of Congress is them to get the job done and produce a bill. When we get into the specifics of it, though, there are a number of provisions in one that we prefer over the other. So we have some specific asks. All of this will be on a leave behind that will be provided to the congressional staffers that you're talking to prior to your meetings with them. So they will have all this on a piece of paper before you meet with them. You will also have a copy of the piece of paper to help walk you through the discussion. First thing, we want them to pass the CHIPS Act. And again, I'll walk through the details on all these in a minute. That's easy because everybody likes the CHIPS Act. It's not technically true, but enough people in Congress like it, and President Biden likes it. So it has good bipartisan support. If the bill passes, CHIPS will be in it. So we want to say support CHIPS Act, but you don't have to fight that. We want a focused and funded NIST Tech Directorate. We want, which is in the USICA bill, we want USICA's tech transfer provisions included in the final version of the bill. We want USICA's workforce training provisions in the final bill. And then we want the Competes Act language on immigration, on high-scale visa reform, with some little adjustments to make it work. All right, so that is our USICA Competes ask list. Now let's walk through it. The CHIPS Act, many of you know, it's a bill designed to bring computer chip manufacturing back into the United States. Includes $52 billion for computer chip manufacturing direct support. There are some other pots in the USICA bill. Like I said, both CHIPS is in both Competes and USICA. President Biden mentioned CHIPS in his State of the Union address, so he is supportive. There are differences between the USICA and the Competes version of the CHIPS Act. They don't really matter. There's some pieces we like better than others, but they're very small differences. So all we need to do on CHIPS is urge Congress to include it in the final version of the bill. If they want to talk about the details, you can have them contact us. We'll contact them. But you don't need to spend a lot of time on CHIPS because it is supportive. Most of Congress is already on board, and it's almost certainly going to happen if the big bills happen. So let's get to the more interesting parts. NSF Technology, Innovation, and Partnership Directorate. This was a big part of the USICA bill. And up until a couple weeks ago, it was going to be one of our primary asks in the fly-in. And then Congress created the directorate. In the fiscal year 2022 budget, which passed a couple weeks ago, Congress created this new piece of the National Science Foundation, Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate. The problem is that the omnibus bill didn't define the directorate. It didn't say this is what the directorate is going to do, and it didn't give the directorate its own budget. Now, this is not terribly surprising. Usually Congress doesn't, there are multiple directorates in NSF, and Congress generally doesn't specifically fund them. It gives the NSF director a pot of money, and then the director divides it up among the directorates. We want a little more substance, a little more structure put into this directorate. Specifically, we want Congress to pass the USICA definition of the directorate. Now, USICA uses a different name for the directorate, but that doesn't matter. We have a directorate that's been created. We should work within that structure. But what USICA does is it says this new directorate will focus on 10 broad areas of innovation, and they're listed there on your screen. Don't worry about remembering these things because everybody on Capitol Hill knows what they are and they're in the bill. It is sufficient to say we like how USICA defines the new tech directorate. But if you look at the list there, they're all technologies. They're all things that IEEE is involved in, with the possible exception of material science, which gets into a lot of chemistry. But this is what we want this new directorate to focus on. Cutting edge, high impact research areas. These are the research areas that are most likely to result in new jobs, in new companies, and in long-term economic growth. And so creating an NSF directorate to do that is a good idea. We also want the USICA language that creates a specific budget line for this directorate to be included in the final version of Competes. USICA funds the directorate with $10.8 billion. That's a good number for us to focus on. Obviously, if they drop that down to $7 or $8 billion, that's still a lot of money. That is new money. So we're not taking money away from any of the other existing directorates. But we do think this directorate is important enough that it should have a set-aside budget. And that is the ask. 10.8 is what is in USICA. We think that's great. But the more important ask is that this budget is defined in Competes. The directorate is defined in Competes and has its own budget. Tech transfer. Tech transfer, for those of you who don't know, are government programs to help move technology out of academia and out of the national labs into the marketplace, something we're not especially good at. There are programs in both Competes and USICA, but USICA's are bigger and they're better defined than Competes. Again, we're not against Competes, but USICA is improved. Two particular programs in USICA that we want to highlight: the Manufacturing USA program, which exists and works reasonably well, but USICA expands, and regional technology hubs. This is an innovative idea. It comes from Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer from New York. But a regional technology hub is designed to pull innovation. You know, if you look around the country, there's innovation everywhere, but a lot of it is concentrated in a few places: Austin, Boston, and of course, Silicon Valley. Regional tech hubs are centers funded by the government, made up of partnerships of local universities, businesses, and governments in places that are not currently technology hubs. In other words, Austin, Boston, and Silicon Valley are not going to get one of these. But Missouri might, and Arkansas might. They're designed for the parts of the country that have not benefited from our technology economy as much as the tech centers. This is politically awfully valuable, but it's also really good for the country because there are very clever, very innovative people all over the country. Some of them have access to great government programs and some of them don't. And so the regional technology hubs will diversify the innovation economy geographically, which should make our innovation economy more innovative, which is good. And so USICA does this better than Competes by deliberately and consciously distributing the innovation funding and innovation programs more broadly across the country, which IEEE-USA thinks is a good idea. And so that concept is the ask, that Competes, the final language of Competes, should echo USICA's priority of diversifying our innovation economy and spreading technology and tech transfer more broadly across the country. Before I forget, if you have any questions, if I'm not being clear about any of this, please put them in the chat and we'll rotate back to that at the end of the presentation. Workforce training. A lot of language and a lot of bills on the need to train American workers for, our growing technology economy. Congress agrees with that. Both bills have language on workforce training, but USICA's is much better. In this case, it actually is dramatically better. Competes focuses almost exclusively on graduate students and postdocs, which are important, and getting more research grants for postdocs and for graduate students are a good thing. But there's a lot more people in the innovation economy than just graduate students in the STEM fields and postdocs. USECA includes apprenticeships, at-work training programs, internship programs, undergraduate research, and for the computer fields, undergraduate degrees are often the terminal degree. So for computer programmers, that's a big deal, as well as graduate and postdocs. And so it's not that we don't want to get more funding for graduate students, it's that we recognize that the innovation workforce requires a lot more than just graduate students. So to be truly innovative, we need lab techs, we need mechanics, we need repair people, we need people who just know how to make, for example, manufacturing centers that rely on robots. You need someone to design the robots, but you also need someone to maintain the robots. And that training is different, but still important. So not everybody in the workforce needs a college degree. There are lots of good jobs out there, good jobs that sometimes go empty because we don't have enough people, for people who just know how to make things work. And the government should encourage that and encourage people to develop the skills necessary to work in this space. It's also, by the way, important to note that this argument has enormous political salience. Politicians get this. They understand that most Americans are not going to get a PhD. Most Americans are not going to be postdocs. The idea that we need our workforce training programs to embrace the entire country, including communities that don't produce a lot of postdocs, has a lot of political strength. And so IEEE-USA is embracing that, both because it's the right answer, but because it's also politically useful. And so our ask here is that workforce training programs should be democratized and should be available to all levels of workers, not just those at the very top of the education pyramid. So we want to be careful when we talk about that we don't talk down to people who don't go to college. They're very smart. They can be very skilled. They're very essential to the economy. They just took a different path. Let's talk about the immigration provisions. This was actually a surprise. Nobody knew this was going to be in competes until the bill popped out. And unfortunately, because the guys who wrote the competes bill didn't talk to the right people, there are some problems with the language. But the general idea in competes is a good one. They have expanded the green card system. These are the permanent residency visas that make American citizens, creating more green cards for people who earn a master's or a PhD in a STEM field, which is good. IEEE-USA has been advocating that idea for decades. We were one of the first and one of the loudest to support that idea, so we think that is fantastic. The problem is, competes in the House allows PhDs and masters to be earned at any university anywhere in the world, which is nice, but that doesn't actually work because there's a lot of fraud in the higher education system in other countries. I mean, there's some fraud in this country, but it's easier to catch in this country. The fact of the matter is, it's hard to tell if a university in another country is in fact educating people and providing, issuing real PhDs, or is just a diploma mill. And so to work, the language really needs to be limited to just universities in the United States. There are, of course, some excellent universities outside of the United States, Indian Institute of Technology, University of Tokyo, Oxford, Cambridge. The problem is that putting that in law to say good foreign universities qualify, bad universities don't, is actually very, very hard. It's easy to do within the United States, and they do that. But just to make things simple, limiting this program to just the US is probably a good idea. The House bill, the competes bill, also has no cap on the number of visas issued, which is fine with us, but is not fine with many members of Congress. And so our message there is, if Congress needs to put a cap on the number of these STEM green cards that are being created, we're okay with that if that's necessary to get the bill passed. The fact of the matter is, if we can get 50,000 new visas, that's essentially everybody. Everybody who's earning a STEM master's or PhD in the United States who wants to stay, it's probably between 30 and 40,000 people. So if we set the cap at 50, it will cover everybody. We set it at 30,000, it will get almost everybody. But if we can only get 10,000, that's still 10,000 new green cards. If that's what it takes to get the bill passed, we will take it. Additionally, the Competes Act makes student visas dual intent. That is a technical phrase for a visa. A visa is just a document that allows someone to enter the United States. Some visas allow you to apply for other visas while you're using them. Some visas do not. A student visa technically does not, which means if you are an international student and you wish to immigrate to the United States, you have to wait until after you graduate before starting the process, which is just a pain. Making a student visa dual intent will allow international students to start the immigration process while they're earning their degree, allowing them to get a green card faster once they graduate. It doesn't change the number of visas. It just makes the application process less painful. And so what we're asking here is that Congress adopt the competes language in the final version of the bill with a limitation that only universities in the United States qualify for practical purposes. We're willing to accept a cap on the number of visas if that's required. If it's not, we can keep it uncapped, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be required. And they should make student visas dual intent. Making student visas dual intent is pretty popular, so that's not a hard fight. The other two are politically challenging. All right, so that's USICA and competes. We have some other issues that we are going to be sending you briefing material on that you can bring up or not bring up depending on how much time you have and how important these things are to you. We're going to get your briefing paper on energy reforms. This has come up relatively recently because of the situation in the Ukraine. A lot of legislators are talking about energy security. And even if you don't bring this up, there's a reasonable chance it's going to come up in your meetings because the legislators are going to want to talk about it. How do we make the United States energy independent? How do we secure our electrical grid from cyber attack? How do we secure our energy supplies to make sure we and Western Europe and the rest of the world have enough energy without relying on Russia? We'll send you some information on that. There is a ton of legislation on this right now, so much so that I can't even tell you what the important ones are yet, but that's not important. If your legislator wants to talk about this, what they're going to want is a technical explanation of how the electrical grid works, how the power system works, how we can secure our power systems. If you don't know the answers to those questions, that's fine. Say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. But if you happen to know about this stuff, tell them the answer. Talk about it from a technical standpoint, which, by the way, I can't brief you on because I don't know that. That is actually the power of these meetings. You have the ability to explain technology to them from a technologist's perspective, which I can't as your representative in Washington, as lobbyists from the various companies can't do either. And so if you get into that conversation, that is fantastic. SBIR, that's the federal grant program for startup companies small companies to do basic research to get their companies off the ground. That program needs to be reauthorized this year. That's normal. All these programs are reauthorized regularly. We're big fans of the SBIR and STTR program, which is a sister program. I'm going to get you some briefing material on this. If you are a small business person that knows about this issue, mentioning it into your meeting is a good idea. It might be on your legislator's mind, so they might want to talk about it. We'll have some asks for the fiscal 2023 budget. I'll talk about that in just a second. And I'm going to send you a briefing on artificial intelligence because there's a lot of really high-level discussion going on at lots of different places in the government over AI technology. IEEE-USA is right in the middle of a lot of that. So I want you to know what we're doing. But you also might be asked, again, if you're not an expert in AI, if you don't know anything about AI, that's fine. Say, I really don't know about that technology, but I can find out. Then you tell me and we'll get them the information. But if you do know about AI technology and do have thoughts on AI, it might come up. And so you should be prepared. So like I said, this briefing material will end up in your digital tool that you should have received by now from Soapbox Consulting. And if you have any questions about the material when you see it, let me know and we can talk about it. So let's talk about the fiscal 2023 budget. This is what I know about it. That is it. The president's budget, which is kind of the first step in creating the fiscal 2023 budget, came out yesterday at 3 o'clock. It's a very large document. We're still working through it. What we will send you at some point this week is a couple highlights and maybe a couple lowlights. I'm assuming there will be a couple lowlights in the budget that we might want to mention to the staff. It is unlikely that the staff is going to be ready to talk about this because Congress has not really started talking about the budget yet. The president's budget just came out yesterday. Even by next week, they will have just started to get their heads around it. Frankly, Congress doesn't really care about the president's budget all that much. It gives us a tool for talking about a couple issues, but Congress is going to do their own thing. And so the president's budget starts the budget process, but it's not actually a terribly important part of the budget process. Let you know something is coming on this, but because it is happening literally right now, I don't actually know what to tell you yet because we haven't finished the analysis. All right, that was a lot. I want to remind you that your key to a successful meeting is not to get into the details of the bill. I mean, I gave you the bill numbers. You can read the bills if you want, but the staff knows the bills better than you do, and they don't need you to tell them what's in them. What they need to know from you is what you want, high level. We want the workforce stuff from USICA. That's it. And they want to know how these bills are going to affect your local community. A few good anecdotes about research that goes on in your community, innovation that's happening in your company, in your school, things that you're working on, those little tiny anecdotes about your local community that really highlight the importance of these issues to voters in your district or state are vastly more valuable than the high-level analysis that I can provide. And you don't have time to do both. So the trick here is to focus on your local hooks. Legislators need to know what their voters are going to think about these bills, which you know because you are a voter. And so that information is a lot more important than the analysis that I can provide, which is why I didn't go into the details on the bill, because you don't have to do that. Like I said, there will be a one-page message summary that I have almost done on my computer that will be sent to you and everybody you're going to meet with in advance. So they will already have that before you meet, and they'll have it in front of them. We'll also be sending out a one-page, this is who IEEE is, this is who IEEE-USA is sheet that the staff will also have in advance. Additionally, you will get a series of briefing sheets, which I told you about a minute ago, especially the FY 2023 budget and the AI sheet. That will come only to you. If these issues come up in your meeting, you can then send them to the staff afterwards. It's a great excuse to do a follow-up email. But if it doesn't come up and it's not something you think is important, you don't have to include it. And that's fine, because there's really too much that I've now given you to do in your meeting. So you got to pick and choose. All right. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick and turn back to Kevin at Soapbox Consulting. And now I'm a little concerned that Kevin is not able to join us during the meeting. I don't think we can hear him. And I think that is because I sent Kevin the wrong link. And so I'm going to quickly go here and send Kevin a different link. Oops. Which will allow him to join the call. And while we wait for that, I'm going to go back to my slides. Sorry about this. This fly-in this year has been, these CVD events are always kind of impromptu. There's always things changing at the last minute. This year has been particularly challenging, both because we have so many of you involved, but because things are changing so quickly. And Jonathan, if Kevin from Soapbox Consulting joins backstage, could you please put them in the meeting? Put him in the meeting. And while we wait, Kevin is going to walk us through the digital tool and kind of the technical side of things. While we're waiting, I'm going to go over the remaining training schedule with you, something you already know. All of these links are on our website. I will send them out when I send out reminders the day before, but we'll have an additional training session on April 4th at 10 a.m. That could be a very short meeting, could be a very long meeting. It depends on how much has changed between now and then. But at the very least, we'll kind of go over the high-level messages again. And then most of your meetings will be April 6th. We have a few meetings on the 5th and a few meetings that are scattered the days after the 6th, depending on people's availability. But you'll see all that when you see your calendar. Like I said, all the links for these meetings are either in your digital tool or on the website. All right, Jonathan, do we have Kevin on the call yet?
Iris, not yet, but I'll let you know as soon as he joins us.
Okay. And again, sorry about that. We're always kind of winging these things. Oh,
Russ, so Kevin just joined us.
Excellent. Kevin.
Hello there. Can you hear me okay?
I can. And I, again, apologize to everyone. I think I sent you the participant email instead of the speaker link, and that is my fault. So thank you.
Worry.
One of the great things about working with Soapbox. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to join you all. I am Kevin Schultz. I'm with Soapbox, and we had the pleasure and the honor to schedule your meetings with Capitol Hill. And I'm going to take you through your schedule. I'm going to take you through how to see your team. I'm going to show you how to get feedback after each meeting. And I'm even going to show you how you can join a practice session right after this if you choose to. So let's go to the next slide, please, so that I can show you some details about the mobile tool. So you should have received an email by now from Soapbox that reveals your own individual schedule in real time. If you did not get that preliminary schedule, not to worry, we will take care of you. We can email that to you afterwards. But the mobile tool is simply a website. It is not an app. There is nothing to download. Let's go to the next slide, please. Let's look at some of these numbers too. I wanted to show you that there are now up to 300 people now registered from more than 40 states. And I know that we've heard that already, but I just want to emphasize how important that is. It's rare that we have groups spraying more than 40 states. So congratulations for accomplishing that. And also congratulations, you're now over 250 members of Congress. So that is incredible. Congratulations. Good news, most of you are in teams for these advocacy days, for this advocacy day. So you will not be alone, most of you. All right, let's go to the next slide, please, because I want to show you more about the mobile tool. The first time you go in, it will ask for a cell number. It does not mean that you have to use the mobile tool on your phone. In fact, we encourage you to use it on your laptop or your desktop because big screens are key. We ask you for your cell number so that we can text you reminders to your phone 1 hour before each meeting. While all of the meetings are listed in Eastern Standard Time, we know many of you are in different time zones. So we want to remind you when a meeting is coming up. In addition, if a change were to happen on the day of the event, you'll get a text with a push notification. All right, next slide, please. Once you put your code in and enter your phone number, you will land on this screen. And if we move forward in these slides, I believe it will show a highlighting around each button. And the one thing I want to land on here is that phone number that should pop up at the end. If it doesn't, Russ, don't worry about it. But there's a red button there at the bottom. That is the most important one for you during the advocacy day. That has our phone number, and we have live assistance for you all day during the advocacy day. We have 11 people waiting to take your call. So be sure to use the phone if you have any issues. There's also a button for documents. You'll find copies of our issue briefs, which detail what we're asking Congress to do for us. You can print those documents, you can pinch, you can zoom, you can even email them to yourself or to a staffer who has a question about them. Soapbox will send copies of our issue briefs to each Hill office with our confirmations. But be aware that even though we will send them, you'll sometimes hear from a staffer, I haven't had a chance to look at them, or I haven't received them. You can always send them from the document section, or you can call our help desk and we'll resend them. There's a button for the bios of your members of Congress, so you can do a little research ahead of time if you like. There's a button for your team. Those are the folks with whom you are paired with for the advocacy day and for the practice session if you choose to join. And then there's the button for your schedule. That is the button you will push most often. It has all of the links to your meetings, and that schedule is in real time, meaning if something changes, you will see it change. The reason I stress that, some folks have asked, how can I put this into my calendar? Or can you send me calendar invites? You definitely want to use the mobile tool because so many of these meetings change the day before and the day of the event that you'll want to use the mobile tool. Let's go to the next slide, please. When you click your team, you will see the folks you are teamed with for the practice session and for the advocacy day. Your team has the exact same list of meetings. That way you don't have to reconfigure each meeting between each appointment. You come up with a spiel, you march through your day together, and you support one another. If you want to contact someone before the meetings, email addresses are right there. And then when you meet for your practice session, if you choose to, you can also share cell numbers. We wanted to go as far as sharing email addresses, but we'll let you decide if you want to share your cell phone numbers with each other. All right, next slide, please. When you click that schedule button, this is what you'll see. The schedule will pop up in chronological order. There is a one-click link to join the meeting, and of course they are on Zoom, which we've all used. You simply press the link and you join. There's no lobby or waiting area. Soapbox is opening all of these virtual rooms for you. Just quickly get in by pressing the link. Under each link, there's a phone number and a PIN. You don't have to use that. It's just a backup in case you're on your way to a meeting and for some reason your camera or your mic does not work. If you see a TBA, it's one of those meetings that we're still working on. It's not a decline. It's just one of those offices that Russ mentioned waits till the last minute to confirm times, and they do that, a number of them. We've also tracked the key committees for this event. Those are the members of Congress who work with our issues more than others because of their committee assignments. If you're a newbie to Advocacy Day, don't worry about the key committees at this point. Just know that we've put those in brackets right above that feedback button at the bottom. One other thing I want to point out, at the very top, you see that orange box. That is where you will see the link for your practice session, which I'll go over a little bit more in detail in a moment. And then at the very bottom, there's that feedback button I mentioned, the megaphone icon. I want to show you what happens in the next slide when we push that button so that you can see what pops up when you press that feedback button. And we do ask at least one of you to please answer the feedback questions. One of you from each group, please answer the feedback questions after each meeting. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the questions pop up, you answer them. You don't have to say who you are or which meeting you're talking about because the mobile tool already knows that. You simply need to answer the question so that you can let Russ know how each meeting went. And I have to tell you, feedback is not just for the member or staffer if they've changed their mind. This is so that Russ can continue the conversation beyond the Hill Day. So if the office is a friend and still a friend, tell us that. If someone doesn't get it, they still don't get it, tell us. You've showed up and you've been counted. Now you want to give us some details so that in a long and complicated process, that conversation can move forward rather than being restarted. And then finally, we encourage you to take a screenshot of your meeting. When you do so, you can easily upload it to the mobile tool. There's that camera icon on the lower left portion of the feedback. You can upload that photo, and then Russ will get all of those at the end of the day. And I know he likes to get those screenshots at the end of the day. All right, next slide, please. Really quickly, we use Zoom for our virtual meetings only because that's what the Hill likes to use. So we want to use what they use. Next slide, please. I know you've all used it. Just a reminder, if you're using a new computer or a different laptop for the Advocacy Day, remember to download Zoom. And then next slide, a couple of things I want to point out about our Zoom. Remember that the chat feature, if you use it, it can be seen by the member or the staffer. So you want to be careful about what you type in there. Most of your meetings are video meetings. In a few cases, the staff will choose not to use the camera. We've told them that's okay if they choose to do that. It's not a slight. Sometimes they don't feel like they are dressed for success on that day, or maybe they're still working out of their apartment and they don't want folks to see in their apartment. So that's why I mentioned that. So for nearly all of our Hill meetings, you click on the link and you join. The only time you would not click on a link is if an office provided its own platform or dial-in information, in which case you would see those details on your schedule. I think about Senator McConnell. I think about Senator Cornyn. Those are the offices that often provide their own phone number for you to call, and you will see that on your schedule. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Keep moving forward. There we are. I'm about to come to an end of my presentation, so I just want to prepare you for a practice session that is available to you once we are done. Once this briefing is over, you can quit this platform, go into the mobile tool, and then click on that green button that says your schedule. Then you'll see that bright orange box I showed you earlier that has the link for your practice session. You can go in and check that your mic works, your camera works, and if the others from your team join, you can practice. But I bring that up simply because the practice room link is the link for the Senate meetings in most cases. So you'll be joining the same virtual room you'll be joining on the advocacy day. So once you do it, you know you're set for the advocacy day. All right, let's go to the next slide. I want to show you some tips for these meetings. Next slide, please. Remember that we don't bring up election or campaign contributions in a legislative meeting. Remember to stay on message so that it's heard loud and clear. We want to stick with the legislative ask because we have limited time in these meetings. Remember to put ourselves on mute if we're not speaking. We want to put our pets, our children, our loud appliances out of the room. Remember that staff may choose to join the meeting by phone, and we're gracious if that's the case. And while we can ask permission to take a screenshot of our meetings, we don't record the meetings or videotape them, or the office will definitely end the meeting prematurely. We will put the email address of each person you meet with on your schedule toward the end of the advocacy day, and that's so that you can follow up with a thank you note. We have found in a busy time that those that follow up are the ones the staff and the member of Congress help most often because they realize, oh, this is a person that's going to keep checking back with me, so I better do what they say. So remember that we'll put the email address of the staffer at the end of the advocacy day on your schedule. We've requested that each meeting be scheduled 1 hour apart. If you see 30 minutes between meetings, it's because the office came back to us and said that they could not do the hour slot. At the start of your first meeting, you can say, hey, we have a meeting 30 minutes after this one. We're happy to keep this to 25 minutes. Believe me, the staffer will be happy to do that, and then you will have no problem. The most important tip I want to share with you is what to do if a member of Congress or a staff member does not show up to your meeting right away. As the afternoon wears on, staffers and members get behind just like we do, and that will happen more often as the day goes through. You'll want to wait at least 5 or 10 minutes before doing anything. Stay in the room. Have everybody stay in the room. But after 5 or 10 minutes, if they still haven't shown up, have one person call our help desk. We have direct numbers to a lot of these offices. We have their email addresses. We call them, we email them, and they typically just pop in because they were running late. I think that's all the tips I have for you. I'm happy to stay on here, Russ, if you want me to stay on for any questions. But with that, I want to wish you all the best of luck for the Advocacy Day, and I'll hand it back to Russ.
Thank you very much. I just want to let you all know, I've been working with Soapbox Consulting for a very, very long time, and they are extraordinarily good at what they do. They are a tremendous resource for you and a tremendous resource for us. Take advantage of them. If anything goes wrong on the day of your meeting, contact Soapbox Consulting directly. They got experts that can fix whatever it is that is wrong. We already went over the training schedule. Again, April 4th, we'll, as I said, things are changing today. And so there may be small adjustments in what we're talking about and some updates I need to give you then that will be recorded just like this one is. A couple reminders, and then we will slide to your questions. Most importantly at this point, if you need to cancel, I get it. It happens. You all have jobs, you have families, you have lives. We prefer members that don't have those things because they're easier to work with. But I know many of you do, in fact, have other things going on in your life, which is okay. If you need to cancel, that's the way it goes. But you need to tell us. We do not want to find ourselves in a situation where we have a meeting with a member of Congress and nobody shows up. That is particularly bad. which is why it is so important that you log into your digital tool quickly, and certainly before Friday. In last year's CVD, we did in fact have a couple meetings where nobody showed up, just a couple, but we don't want that again. If you haven't logged into your digital tool by Friday, Soapbox Consulting will have to reach out to you to confirm that you're still participating. If we are unable to reach you by Monday, we will have to start thinking about canceling your meetings, simply because it's embarrassing if nobody shows up. So if simply by logging in, opening up the digital tool, you will be confirming to us that you're on board and you're ready to participate. Again, if you need to cancel, that's fine. But we need to know that you're looking forward to this, and you tell us that by logging in. Lastly, sometime between now and next week, you need to talk to your team and your teammates. Go over who's going to say what. Go over what things you want to highlight, local stories we want to focus on. Generally, just get yourself organized. That can be through a practice session and the practice link, but I mean, you guys all know how to work Zoom. And so I don't think that's important. Kevin, if you are not muted, I think I'm picking up a little bit of your typing.
Thank you.
But you are going to need to coordinate. This is especially true for California, Texas, New York, and some of the bigger states. If you're going to try to wing a meeting with 20 people, that's not going to go well. And so you're going to need to chat at least with many of you to pick a leader, someone who's going to start things off and kind of direct the conversation. If you need any help with that, please let me know. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen again. There we go. And I'm going to open up the comments to see where we are. Skylar, our leader from New Mexico. Awesome to have our good New Mexico team. All times in all of our sessions are listed in Eastern time, just to keep things simple. Some of the states cut across time zones, and trying to do differently for each one of you would have just been a mess. So everything is Eastern time zone. Don, glad you could join us with the chat. I don't know why it didn't work last time. You can look up who voted for USICA and competes online. Congress.gov is the best way to do it. Just type in the bill number that we gave you. However, it's really complicated. There are a lot of different versions of these bills out there. There's going to be more versions of them before your meetings. And so trying to figure out where your member is on this is actually a lot harder than it sounds, which is why it may be better not to bother. The bill that we are eventually going to want them to vote on hasn't even been written yet, which makes the conversation a little tricky, but it also is a great opportunity because, like I said, you're going to be talking to your legislators the day that they're trying to figure out what's in the bill, or at least a couple of days before that decision, which is the most perfect time to have that conversation. But it does mean that they can't give you a commitment on whether they'll support the bill because they don't know what the bill looks like. No legislator is going to tell you that they will vote for a bill that hasn't been written yet. They may say they're supportive. They may say many other things, but we can't really ask them to commit until it's written, which it isn't, which is okay. Because what is important is not their commitment. It is your expression of what you want as a voter, and that you can do. Gloria, I think that's Gloria C. There is the shops. The problem with both Competes and USICA is they are, in fact, a grab bag of a ton of smaller bills. I do not know off the top of my head if the Shop Safe Act was ultimately included, nor whether it's included in whether it'll be included in the final bill. Gloria, I will look that up for you and let you know. Yeah, Ed, material science obviously involves a lot of engineering. There's some non-engineering in there too. The natural disaster prevention, or the disaster, man-made or otherwise, prevention is also a lot of environmental science and some of the other sciences, which is fine. The point is, the USICA bill defines the new tech directorate in the NSF as primarily a technology center, and we want that. Joe, yes, Pittsburgh is awesome. Not sure what your question is there. Yeah, Michael, you've identified the problem there. Supporting graduate and postdoc is good, but those folks have already committed to going into the STEM fields. Supporting people that are trying to get in but lack the resources to get a PhD, don't really understand how to get a PhD. Supporting those folks and getting them into the STEM workforce is a good thing as well, both because it's good to attract non-traditional people into our fields, but also because if we don't, the fields aren't going to go very well. We need these folks. And so it's politically important and it's economically important. David, most of Congress is going to be receptive to this. Mr. Sua, these meetings aren't really about what we are and what we want. You be a Marxist, you can be a Republican, you can be whatever it is you want, and that's perfectly fine. What's important is that you live in the district. And so this is about what you want the legislators to do more than your personal political beliefs. It is entirely possible, folks, that you will have a meeting next week with someone you would never, ever, ever vote for. Don't tell them that. And that's not important for them to know. You're a voter and you're not coming as someone. This isn't a campaign meeting. This is a business meeting. Their job is to represent you, which they can't do if they don't know what you think. So you're going to tell them, this is what I want you to do, and that's all. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter who you give money to. You don't want to bring up who you give money to in any context. It's about the message, and everything else is secondary. CAPA, I'm not sure who that is, but are there anticipated tech hubs as part of USICA? Not in, I think, the way you're asking this question. USICA says there shall be tech hubs set up, but it doesn't say where they'll be. And you don't want to do that because politically you want anybody that wants one of these things to support the bill. Honestly, one of them is going to be in upstate New York because Senator Schumer wrote the bill and he wants one in upstate New York. But where the rest of them will be, we don't know. Once the bill passes, once the final bill passes, there will be a competitive process for getting one of these. The bill anticipates 8 to 10 of them around the country. The exact criteria is spelled out in the bill, but it will be a competitive process. Yeah, Joe, the idea of paper clipping a card to a degree has been around a long time. That's not exactly what is happening. You have to get a job offer in your field, and then your company applies for one of these green cards. So it's not quite paper clipping into the degree, but it's close. It's the same basic idea that IEEE-USA has been championing for nearly 30 years now. I've been doing it for nearly 20. It's my life's work at this point. Yeah, Ed, and you get to the point of the universities. In the United States, we have a system in place for determining what a legitimate university is and what a pretend university is. And the Department of Education and the Department of State and a bunch of other pieces of the government police that reasonably well. Once you get outside of the country, though, there's nothing there. I mean, some countries there are, Canada, we know what the good schools are, but some countries we don't. And it's actually very, very difficult, other than the elite schools, it's very difficult for the US government to tell what good schools are and what pretend schools are. It would be possible to create a list of kind of good foreign universities, and we're open to that. But in legislative language, that's very messy. And so we are strongly suggesting Congress just limit the program to schools in the United States. We can amend it down the line to open it up to, the engineering schools in Canada, the good schools in Europe, the good schools in Asia, in Africa, and South America. But that's actually harder to do. Create the program, get it working, and then we can improve it down the line. But creating it is going to be the hard part. Copies of this entire presentation will be available online. A recording will be made online that should be available shortly. And if you would like copies of the slides, just email me and I'll send them to you, which raises, Hugh, a very important point, which is everything that I'm sending you, you should assume is public. You can share it with other IEEE members. You can share it with your local section. Once you get 300 people seeing these documents, we should assume they're not going to remain private, and you can distribute them any way you like. And that is perfectly fine. That also goes to all of my slides, which you can use any way you like. Brendan, that's a good and very complicated question, which I don't actually know the answer to. If restrictive green card cap passed, how would the cards be distributed? And it would probably be a first come, first serve, but regulations would have to be created to actually decide that. We don't want to get into it here. All you want to tell the legislators is you think it's a good idea, and then we can work out the details later. Again, create the program, then we'll perfect it later on, but creating is the hard part. Howard, the definition of what an accredited university is or what a real university is in the bill. So we don't have to discuss that or worry about it because it's already there. Congress knows we have to do that, and they've done it. It's basically referring to the Higher Education Act, and schools that have certain criteria and do a certain amount of research and have a certain number of students qualify. It's a complicated process, but it already exists. It's already being used in a bunch of other contexts. So all we have to do is keep using it here, and that'll work nicely, and it's already in the bill. Dave. So this is it, Dave. This gets into a very big set of issues. The Competes Act and USICA say nothing about the H-1B program, which we obviously have very serious problems with. The H-1B program is messed up. We are trying to work with Congress and specifically Senator Durbin and Senator Grassley to get reforms, but that will not be part of the USICA debate. And frankly, it's not really on Congress's agenda at the moment, which is why we're not bringing it up. There will not be enough visas created to get everybody who is on an H-1B a green card. That would require somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million new visas, which is kind of the problem with the H-1B. Creating tens of thousands of new visas for advanced STEM green card applicants will help alleviate the backlog, but it won't fix that particular problem. Again, on the immigration front, we have an opportunity to create a new program that will help. It won't fix the whole problem, but we've been trying to improve the situation for 20 years. And we've had no luck. This is our best shot in those last 20 years, and we really want Congress to take it. Let's see. Mr. Sua, yeah, a lot of this stuff is wacky. That's the joy of working with Congress. The email you got from Mr. Torres should have a link to your digital tool. Hugh, if it does not, let Soapbox know, let me know, and we'll try again. But it should be in the email you got from Mr. Torres. The information on the other participants for your state should be in your digital tool. Open it up, and it will be magically and brilliantly there. That's the brilliance of Soapbox. They have packaged in one neat little bundle everything you need to know. So once you get your digital tool and get into it, all your questions should be answered. And if they're not, send me an email and we'll find an answer for you. Mr. Parnell, I'm not sure what state you're in, but I'm going to guess it's going to be one of the big ones. You will have a large number of people in your Senate meetings because everybody from the Senate will be there if you're from California or Texas or one of the big states. Structuring that meeting is going to be hard. Doing these digital meetings with more than 5 or 6 people is tricky. What you want to do, though, is meet ahead of time. So you all talk, or at least most of you talk. Decide who's going to run the meeting. That person should go through the introductions. Say, this is Dave. He's from Smithville. He works for the local utility. This is John. He's in software. 20 people, it's going to be hard to have everybody introduce themselves. 10 or 12, you probably can. But somebody's going to have to run the meeting. And that person will say, okay, now Bill is going to tell us a little bit about USICA. Now, Susan is going to tell us a little bit about what's going on at the university. But you need to decide that up front, who's going to talk about each little piece, and keep to your times. You have just a couple minutes to talk about whatever you're going to talk about, to go through it. And you're going to have a little bit of structure. Now, having said that, the staff you're going to be meeting with, the legislators you're going to be meeting with, do a lot of these meetings. They're very good at it. If you trust them, and if they want to interject, let them. If they want to direct the conversation, let them. They're very good at managing big meetings. Anybody that works for a senator from California is used to doing really big Zoom meetings. They get that it's hard. They get that not everyone's going to get to say everything they want. They understand, and they're sympathetic, and they will help you with the meeting if you let them. Keep in mind, folks, the staff and the legislators' primary goal for your meeting is to have you leave happy, because if you leave happy, you're likely to vote for them. So they are going to work with you to make this a positive experience. This is not a hostile meeting. They are not going to get angry with you. They'll get angry with me if you say something they don't like, and that's fine because I'm a lobbyist. They don't have to have me like them. But they want you to leave happy, and they're going to work with you. So don't think that this is going to be, and if you fumble it, if you get confused, it's fine. Nobody's going to care because the staff want you to have a positive experience and will help make that happen. Plan ahead, get some organization, know who's going to say what, and if it all falls apart, that is okay. As long as you don't record it and you're not rude. Those are the only two things you can actually do wrong. Awesome. It looks like some people are already using the digital app, which is fantastic. Skylar, thank you for representing New Mexico. I think we have a couple people from New Mexico, which is a politically important state this year. So glad to have you on board. Steve. Yep. Steve Bonk has pointed out that there are a list of all of IEEE-USA's positions on all of our various issues on our website. We are not talking about all of them. Please don't try in your meeting because you don't have time. But if you want to see the other things that IEEE-USA is up to, that's where to look. Jim, if you have not received your soapbox email, we'll look into that. May just be it hasn't popped up yet. You know, sometimes these things get lost in the ether. But we'll look into that and make sure it's there. I imagine that's what Kevin is doing right now. Don, there's a lot that IEEE members can say about energy. And IEEE-USA has a lot to say about energy because you guys know this stuff. Remember, you don't have more than a couple minutes to talk about energy policy at your meeting. I know you want to talk about more than that. But the best thing you can do at your meeting is let the staffer know that you know this stuff. And that if the staffer wants to have a conversation in another setting, another day, they can do that. And it's perfectly appropriate for you to say, I work for a local utility. I work in alternative energy sources. We're really worried about the USICA bill today. But if you want to talk about energy offline in another setting or have me call you back some other day, I'm happy to do it. That's perfectly appropriate. And then follow up with the staffer. Say, listen, I wanted to talk with you a little bit more about energy. Is there another day we can do that? That's fine. But you have a lot to do on your meetings next week. Going into a lot of detail on alternative energy and carbon recapture and zero carbon footprints and all that, you're going to get off track. And so be very careful about your time. Oh, okay, Howard, good, got your schedule. Excellent question, Kapa. What we've tried to do is make sure as many of you have multiple people in your meetings as possible because we want you to give you a team. It is easier to do these meetings with multiple people and more fun. So if you're the only person from your congressional district, we tried to pair you with some other people from your state so you'd have some help. But the meeting is always about the voter. So if you are the only person from your congressional district, it's your meeting. You want to run it. You want to do most of the talking. The other folks can talk too, your teammates. They can help you out. But the focus needs to always be on the voter. But it's easier if you got a couple people helping you out. IEEE is a community. We want to help each other. And so that's how we try to structure things. Yep. And Ed just answered as well. Mr. Parnell, if we cannot confirm, and by confirming, all I need you to do is open up the digital tool. But if nobody from a given team has opened the tool by next week, we have to consider canceling the meeting. And so that's why it's so important that you just open it at some point between now and Friday. Less meeting. I'm a big fan of meat eating, but that's your call on what you want to talk about. Oh, Gloria. Yep. Jim, yeah, you pointed out something that I didn't get into. One of the motivations behind the Competes and USICA bill is, in fact, China. It's a politically touchy subject. You can get into it if you find that persuasive. You don't have to if you don't. But the fact is, making the United States globally competitive in light of competition from China and other countries is a big motivation behind the USICA bill. And for some legislators, that's why they're supporting it. Other legislators, it's not. Which one of it is your legislators? Are they? It doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about what's motivating your legislator to support or oppose a bill. Every single person you talk to is motivated by what their voters want. And so what's important is why you're motivated to support these provisions, why IEEE is motivated to support these provisions, not what's motivating the legislators. Although if you know, that could be helpful. Rob, it's always good to put yourself geographically. Your legislators already know if you're a voter or not. If you are participating in a meeting from the next congressional district over, everybody you're meeting with already knows that because Soapbox has let them know. So you're not hiding anything. So be honest and as transparent as you can be. Same thing if you're not an American citizen yet. Some of you are international students. Some of you are in green cards, or some other visa. That's fine, but be open about it. My name's Stephen. I live just outside the district. This is what I do for a living, and I'm here on an H-1B visa. Just tell them what's going on and be transparent about it, and that's fine. As long as there's a voter in the meeting, they will still pay attention. Lots of good questions here. Okay, so Howard has an interesting comment. We need to define electricity supply and increasing peak demand due to EV. Yes, we do. But you're not going to do that in your meeting. There are actually, IEEE-USA is in the process of organizing an event here in DC over the summer, looking at, the event is tentatively caused how to get to 50 million. And the question is, before we can have 50 million electric vehicles on the road, what else do we need to do? And we'll get into the number of charging stations and what it does to the electric grid and a bunch of other issues. That's not USICA though. And there was an infrastructure bill passed last year that got into some of those issues. Letting your legislator, letting the staff know that you know this stuff is good if they want to talk to you about it some other time. But you only have a limited amount of time. You have to really focus your message on just a couple key issues, and can't get into all the details, which are important, but we can bring them up some other time. Miss Long, you should have the email addresses for all of your teammates in the digital tool. And so email them, put together a little list and start talking to each other. This is how, but it should all be in your Soapbox tool. And the answer to most of these questions, where do I find, how do I get, almost all of the answer is in your digital tool. It's not in the digital tool. Send me an email. We'll find it to you and probably put it in the digital tool, except for the leave behinds, which we're still putting together, which should be in the digital tool by midweek. Can I gauge the level of congressional interest in climate change? Jim, that's a big question. And I'm going to give you a short answer, not because it's not important, because I don't want this to go on until tomorrow. Some members of Congress are very interested in global climate change. Some are very not interested in global climate change. Here's the thing. Everybody's interested in the stability of the electrical grid. Now, if they're interested because they're worried about global climate change or not, the actual policies they support are actually almost always exactly the same. And so the difference is the language they use, not which part of our agenda they will support. So as a general rule of thumb, and this is a gross generalization, but it generally works. If you're meeting with a Republican, you can talk about pollution. You can talk about making the electric grid robust. You can talk about energy independence. Maybe not quite so much global climate change, unless it's important to you, and then talk about it. Because they're interested in your perspective. You don't actually have to worry that much about honing your message for them. But in general, Democrats are much more interested in talking about climate change than Republicans, for what it's worth. Thank you, Skylar. Do we care about march-in rights? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Ed. If you can clarify, I can get back to that. Hugh, is it okay to join a meeting in another state? We generally discourage that. Oh, unless you happen to know Sheldon Whitehouse, in which case, yeah, we kind of do want you in that meeting if you know him from elementary school. That would be good. Generally speaking, we discourage you from going to meetings outside of your team simply because we have so many people. We don't want these meetings to come overcrowded. But if you actually know a member of Congress, yeah, you should tell us that so we can put you in the meeting if we can fit you in. Right, Kevin? Awesome. And by no, I don't mean you bumped into him in a parade once. I mean, if you actually have a relationship there, which elementary school qualifies. I'm just reading Hugh's comment. Of the 6 people, 4 grew up or went to school in Madison. 1 had his lab blown up in the 60s. As long as he wasn't involved in the blowing up of the lab, that's an interesting little story to tell. Nuclear power, Joe. Yeah, that's going to be in the energy ask. There's an interesting thing going on in nuclear power in Congress right now, where Congress is actually very quietly supporting the nuclear energy issue. It was in the infrastructure last year. It's tucked into both USICA and competes, although not in a major way. And it's in the budget. And this will probably be part of our budget ask. The interesting thing is nobody in Congress is talking about it. They're decided to support nuclear power, but they don't want the public to know about it yet. So saying you think nuclear power is awesome is good. Don't expect a big response because they're trying to help you, but they're trying to do it quietly, which is fine with us as long as they do it. All of the section chairs will be given a list of all the CVD participants from their region after the CVD. Walt, I'm not doing it now because I got too many other things to do and the list keeps moving anyway. But we will make that available to the leadership of IEEE after the event. Oh, tech transfer is in the USICA and competes bill. It's not specific to the pharma industry. I'm still not quite sure what march-in is, but if it's a tech transfer thing, it is covered by competes, but it is covered better by USICA. Yeah, Congress has gotten behind the small modular reactors that IEEE-USA was talking about 15 years ago. And they understand that most of Congress understands that the new nuclear reactors are safe. And Kevin, I'm keeping you a very long time. If you need to drop off, I understand. I don't want to monopolize your day. The problem with the new nuclear reactors is the public isn't sold yet. And politicians of all sorts are hesitant to try to convince the public that nuclear power is safe because they're afraid that how it'll play at the ballot box. If you let them know that you think it's great that they do this, that will help. But it is still a touchy subject. Like I said, they're doing it, which is kind of the important thing. They're just not doing it publicly just yet. Okay, a few more comments about navigating the digital tool. Play around with it, poke around with it. There's a help button there if you need it. Soapbox is really, really good at making things easy. And so if you need help, contact them. If you still need help, contact me. That's what we're here for. And with that, I will let you all go to talk to your teams and start the process of figuring out what you're going to say. I want to thank all of you for signing up. This is an incredibly powerful event that we have going here. only because all of you have agreed to participate. 300 participants is fantastic. I know I'm put a lot on your plate here today. We're asking you to do something a little bit tricky in navigating the USICA competes issue. But if we can pull it off even reasonably well, you will send a tremendous message to Capitol Hill at precisely the right moment to take this golden opportunity and turn it into an actual law. And even if we do only half of what we're trying to do, you will have made a tremendous difference to every technology professional and, in fact, every American in the country. And I thank you all for taking up the challenge. I'm just looking to make sure we have no other comments. You got my email, r.t.harrison@ieee.org. My phone number, 202-530-8326. We'll talk to you again on Monday. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Kevin.